Today, I am chatting with the famous Doug Casey. In this interview, we discuss the limitations that Western governments have put on free speech, as well as what it's going to take to get capital to flow back into your favorite junior mining stocks. All right, everybody, enjoy the interview. Doug, thanks for joining us.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here, Steve, although here is not where you are. I'm on my last day on the shores of the Chesapeake in Virginia, and tomorrow I'm off for the mysterious Orient, starting with Kuala Lumpur and and Thailand and Sri Lanka, which I prefer to call Ceylon, but the current name is Sri Lanka. See how things are after a decade or so after, well, 2 decades at this point, really, after their revolution, and a couple of years after their disastrous financial economic meltdown. So, and then back to Uruguay.
So it sounds like you're still traveling quite a bit after all these years.
I've come to despise traveling. I've been to 155 countries, many of them, maybe most of them, twice or numerous times, lived in 10 countries, but enough is enough. I've really kind of been there and done that. So I think I'm going to hang up my traveling spurs because it's just not fun anymore. I mean, when I started flying around, for instance, uh, if you got to the airport and could reach the gate before they pulled up the jetway, you were fine. But now you've got to get there 2 or even 3 hours before in order to go through all the processing and all the nonsense and so forth. That takes all the fun out of it. In addition to the fact that I don't like being prodded and probed by low-life government officials and have my, yeah, so I'm going to try to stay in one place in the future. I've got a lot of books that I want to read, uh, and I don't like being in hotel rooms. That's worn thin on me.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to travel a lot for work now, and my wife was suggesting that we have some sort of remedy at home to try to prevent bed bugs from getting into the house. And there's all these little things you got to think about when you're traveling that just make life it sucks the fun out of it really quickly.
Yeah, it does. So the next time we speak, I'll be either here or in Buenos Aires or Uruguay. 'Cause I've got places in both places. Yeah, so that's the story. Anyway, I think that airfares have become so outrageously expensive. It seems to
That's
me
true.
anecdotal that discourages you from traveling. In addition to the fact that airports are the way bus stations used to be. They're unsavory. They're no fun. And the government doesn't want you to travel anymore. They'd rather you stay in your 15-minute city. Uh, it, part of this paradigm of you'll own nothing and be happy, and we'll make sure that you can afford your rent for your cubicle, and we'll give you some spare change so you can go to Starbucks once in a while.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think governments want us to be in 15-minute cities?
Well, I think it's the nature, a lot of it is the nature of people that go to work for the government. You got a certain type of person that likes the idea of working for the government. Why might that be? Uh, well, let's divide people into two types of people. People that like to mind their own business and produce and create things of value. And the other part of people like to control other people. They're they're busybodies. They're bullies, which is bad enough just in normal life. But if they go to work for the state, then they have power and they love power. So government, since it is congealed power, like Mao Tse-tung said, the power of government comes out of the barrel of a gun. Government draws the wrong kind of people to go to work for it. And in order to give themselves personal importance, they like to boss others around, they like to pass laws, they like to enforce regulations. They like to constrict other people. So that would be my general philosophical answer to why the world is going the direction it is. And not to go on too long, but looking at the trend of Western civilization, which is in active collapse at this point, incidentally. But 100 years ago, the average tax burden taken by the national governments, not just in North America, but in Europe, was 5%, 10% at most. Now we're talking 40%, 50%. France is 60%. So that the state and politics has become vastly more important over the last century. And the trend is still in motion and accelerating. And I find it very disturbing uh, because of the things that I value.
That's effectively how debt-based money has to work, right? If you have to borrow money into existence and you've always got an interest rate attached to it, it's effectively has to compound and grow exponentially. And we're now at a point where the U.S. Is adding, I think it's $1 trillion of debt every 100 days, and then
I think
you,
that's the number. Yeah.
and we look around us, and it's you mentioned airlines. I'm taking my family to Mexico for the holidays later this year, and the same plane tickets that would have cost us $600 are now $1,300, and I'm talking over like a 5-6 year period. And to your point of how expensive it got, and it seems like the part that I find kind of odd, Doug, is I would imagine that if I were going to say restaurants these days, they'd be empty, but I'm still seeing lots of people spending money, but I don't see a lot of job growth, especially here in Canada. And I is everybody now living their lives like the U.S. government and just taking on debt? Where's all the money coming from for people to live their lives like this?
That's a very good observation, and you're quite correct. I noticed that too. Um, and the standard of living in the world has been going down in subtle ways for the last few decades, but perhaps not too radically. And I attribute that to two factors. Number one, the average person, unless they have a criminal mentality, the average person likes to, we're wired like squirrels. We like to produce more than we consume so you can put some nuts aside for the winter. I mean, that's the way we're basically wired, okay? So even if people have been brought up badly and with bad values and so forth, we still like to do that. So that's why the amount of wealth in the world grows despite all the stupidity, number one. Um, and number two, scientists and engineers have been increasing technology and discoveries at the rate of Moore's law, and that's really helped a lot too. But I wonder, with the huge growth of welfare rolls, both among common people and among corporations, uh, half of whom live at the expense of the state, which is to say, at the expense of the plebs. Um, Listen, the whole economy may be at the point of rolling over. I don't know, but the whole world is so over financialized, and there's so much debt in the world, and the money that we have everywhere in the world, it's all fiat money. Uh, that the dollar, no matter which country's dollar or pound or euro, they're all floating abstractions. They're all just paper currencies that governments have adopted what's known as modern monetary theory, where they don't have to tax quite as much because they just print the money up. Uh, and this makes it very hard for the average guy to get ahead. Because to get ahead, you've got to save. And what do you save? You don't save nuts, you save money. But if the money you save in your bank account or whatever is being inflated out of existence, that's very bad. So uh,
it's funny you say that because we have a writer, and when Charlie Munger died, I forget how long ago that was. It wasn't that long ago.
No, it's
Um,
probably 4 months ago, I'm guessing.
yeah, we had this conversation about how a lot of young people they go to the annual report for Berkshire Hathaway in Omaha every year,
Yeah.
and they celebrate Buffett's way of investing. And if you're a young person, and to your point about how you're trying to get ahead, it's almost kind of like, what difference does it make? I need to make so much money to exist in this economy, right? Where a starter home in a terrible neighborhood in where I live in the GTA, the Greater Toronto area, if you're a family and you want a 3-bedroom starter home in a terrible neighborhood that you wouldn't want to live in, it's going to cost you $850,000. So you're going to have to come up with, say, $150,000 down payment, and then you're going to be paying property taxes and having to upkeep the house. Very quickly, you got to have a pretty good income relative to average incomes. Most people living in the GTA, young people, they can't afford it. And now you're telling them, well, you should just be putting away your money and investing like Warren Buffett. Well, that's great if I want to afford a house in 40 years. But
Oh,
how
yeah.
how do you do it? If you're a young person, how do you get ahead?
I think it's very hard, especially since taxes are so high. So whatever you earn, a lot of it's going right out the window to the government to start with. Uh, I really don't know how young people make it today. And of course, many of them have been told, most people have been told, well, you've got to go to college to get ahead. And that's ridiculous, actually. When I was on the Phil Donahue show, God, this is shocking. It's a long time ago. When Phil Donahue was a big deal, he was the Oprah of his day. And of course, Oprah's not on the air anymore either. But anyway, I was on the Donahue show. It's still on the internet. Uh, yeah, and one of the things that I said to the audience was, look, I went to college for 4 years, and if I could get that 4 years back and the money that was spent to send me to college back, I would take it because it's complete misallocation of your time going to college. Anyway, I don't want to go off on that tangent. What I'm about to say is that most young people today think they have to go to college. And to do that, they have to go into debt. And that debt has to be paid off. So they've got an albatross around their debt, around their neck, right out of the box, in addition to taxes and everything else. And today in college, unless you take a STEM degree, which is the only kind that you should bother with, uh, you're really wasting your time and money. Most people, when they go to college, wind up doing nothing but drinking and chasing the opposite sex. That's what happens. And when they go to class, uh, in today's world, they're indoctrinated with all kinds of socialist and woke ideas, so that it's actually a net negative experience, what you think you're learning. Uh, so that's I take a very pessimistic view about the current direction of civilization at this point.
So one of the things that we've seen in Canada, this was actually just this week, they've now extended the allowed amortization period on mortgages, and they have opened up in Canada. You have to take out insurance on a home if you don't have 20% down. Uh, that that then the bank buys and adds onto your mortgage. It used to be you could only get insurance on a house up to $1 million. Now they're extending that up to $1.5 million homes. And I think about what's happening in the States, to your point about colleges, where we basically got this huge federal institution that will loan kids whatever amount of money they want to go to some school and study fine arts. They might as well send them to school to study magic for a $200,000 loan. Which, if these were banks that were privately giving out these loans based on how much money that these students would be able to make off of these degrees, there's no way that they would hand out. And to your point about just the financialization of the world. It seems like our governments are just trying to find ways to get young people to take on as much debt as they can to keep this entire Ponzi system going.
Yeah, it's actually turning the average young person into a serf. You're burdened by your student loans. You're burdened by the loan that you take out to buy your car. Look, it used to be if you wanted a car, you actually paid cash for it and you could afford it after savings. And then financing for cars was 2 years, then 3 years, 4, 5, 7 years. Now, most people lease their car so that instead of having at least a little asset that you'd own after a while, you have an immediate liability that you never get under. So your student loan, your car loan, uh, your home loan, your credit card loans. It seems like many people are living on their credit cards at this point, and now we're talking about 15, 20% or more in interest. I wonder if we're not at the tipping point, quite frankly, especially with the rate at which currencies are being depreciated, uh, which once again makes it harder to set aside money prudently for your future. No wonder that the World Economic Forum was promoting this horrible meme where they had this young guy saying, uh, "You'll have nothing and be happy," you know. Uh, and I can see why a lot of people would say, "Yeah, just give me a place to live and $1,000 of guaranteed annual per month of guaranteed annual income, and you don't want to work." I mean, frankly, who wants to work for a big corporation where you're not just another cubicle dweller? Well, maybe things aren't as bad as I think, because scientists and engineers are out there doing things that are improving the standard of living. And you have entrepreneurs like Elon Musk that are on the way to taking us to Mars. So it's hard to say. But I think there are, from a societal point of view of personal freedom, uh, there's a lot to worry about. A while ago, I thought about this and about the elements that make the West the great place that it is. And a lot of people, the politically woke people, are saying, oh, all cultures and all civilizations are equally good, and we should treat them all as good things. Well, that's just horseshit. Uh, Frankly, I mean, Chinese culture, yeah, I like Chinese culture. Uh, I like martial arts. I like General Tso's chicken. But frankly, China hasn't produced the kind of thing, all the good things that we have around us come from the West. Same with India. And I guess Canada in particular is turning into a new Hindustan because I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, there are about 40 million residents in Canada
Yep.
uh, right now, citizens of Canada, I guess, mostly. But about 1.5 million new immigrants are coming to Canada every year.
Yep.
Most of them are from the subcontinent, and they all live together. And it's changing
Uh-huh.
the culture of Canada rapidly.
Yes.
Now, you can like it or not like it, but I like the old Canada, frankly. I liked, the culture. It was part of Western civilization, and it's being turned into India or Pakistan, whichever you prefer. And earlier, I shouldn't really say this on the air because isn't it true that in Canada, if you say anything, I don't know if it's the law there now, that if you say anything that could be interpreted as being not nice to another culture, that you may be committing a crime. Do you know if that's actually the fact or?
There's, to my understanding, there's been some speculation on that with some of the bills that are introduced, but I don't think we've seen anything come of it yet. But my understanding is that they've sort of given the prime minister the power to now act on the ability to do that, but we haven't seen that happen yet. But we saw what happened with the truckers,
Yeah.
where they really didn't handle that well. I think that regardless of what side of the fence you're sitting on, you can't help but go, okay, that was handled very poorly. And it if Trump were still in office, and there was one rumor circulating around online today that sorry, Trudeau. If Trudeau were still in office in a couple of years, I imagine that we would eventually see those powers come to fruition. But there was a rumor today that was kind of funny that apparently he took his remaining cabinet into a meeting this week and played them the Rocky music and talked about himself like a prize fighter who could take a beating but would come out winning. And you hear that rumor on social media. I don't know if it's true. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. But it just sounds so accurate. I think of how we all think about this guy, that he's just so egotistical. And I don't know your experience watching Canadian politicians and what you've seen of Pierre Poilievre, but from my view, he's one of the most vicious politicians I've ever seen, who will literally beat the crap out of this guy in any debate. He already does it in the House, and Trudeau just seems to take it. And it's actually kind of an entertaining time in Canadian politics. I don't know how much you pay attention to it, but it's not a great time to be a young person living here. I can tell you that much.
No,
But at least it's a little entertaining.
I lived in Vancouver for years, and so I follow Canadian politics to some degree. And as far as I'm concerned, Trudeau is a criminal personality. He really is. He's blessed by being good looking and well spoken, but he's basically the kind of person that I was talking about earlier. That a professional busybody, a professional bully that now has the power to impose his will on other people. And he's going to get worse the way they all do. You know, some time ago, I was thinking about the value of Western civilization. And I put together 12 characteristics of Western civilization. And of course, a lot of young people are being taught today that Western civilization's evil, it's colonialism, it's raping the earth, it's hurting the natives, on and on. And the fact of the matter is that almost everything good that we have in the world comes from Western civilization. And I'm just going to very briefly run down 12 characteristics that are basically unique to Western civilization, and they're all being flushed down the toilet. And number one is free thought. Can't do that. Free speech. Oh, that's a no-no. Free markets. Nope, everything's regulated. The concept of limited government, that's going out the window because the state's becoming more and more powerful. The concept of individualism, they're taught that that's bad. Concept of rationality, which is equated to being white, science and logic and all these things are going out the window. Concept of individual liberty, it's looked upon as being a danger, not an advantage. Concept of progress, well, that leads to inequality. Can't have progress for that reason. Concept of privacy, with surveillance everywhere, both video with cameras and microphones everywhere, NSA equivalents everywhere. That's going out the window. Property rights, well, you own nothing and you'll be happy. They don't like that. And people can't afford property anymore unless they're part of the elite upper class. You're either a pleb and you own nothing, or the upper class and you own everything. The rule of law, that's going out. The idea of industry and enterprise. Everybody's being turned into a cubicle dweller. And if you become very wealthy, then people are taught to hate you. So these are all things that the West brought to the world. Previously, everybody was either a serf or a peasant or a worker, and that was the vast majority of the world, or the elite, of the aristocrats. And the West gave us the middle class, people in the middle that are, for all the faults of the middle class, the so-called bourgeoisie. It's where entrepreneurialism and free thought and artwork all came from. But the middle class is being squeezed, as Lenin said. who hated the middle class. It's being ground between the millstones of taxes and inflation. Anyway, sorry for that little lecture, Steve, but I think it just needs to be said because I don't think that is said very often today.
And Doug, something that I love about you is it's real. When I talk to some of these other guys, I'm not going to name who, but we talked to a lot of mining guys that have had tremendous success and have made a lot of money, much like yourself. And they keep trying to tell us that it is rosy and that you've just got to know where the right opportunities are. And uh, of
Well,
course, they have access.
that's true. That's true. I mean, yeah, that's right. But the average guy isn't in the room. We have a saying that's popular in cat in the room, in the deal. Uh,
Yeah, well,
Most people can't be in the room and in the
that
deal, so they're screwed.
that's exactly what I wanted to say, though, is that one of these guys who always says, "Oh, there's lots of opportunity out there." You go talk to him about financing one of these mining companies, and all he cares about is getting a secure debt deal where, when the company fails, he can then own the asset. And so for him, there's lots of opportunity out there because he's building a war chest of assets for eventually when the world needs these things. But if we're talking about the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker who's trying to find some of these junior mining stocks to put some money in to get some alpha, it is challenging. It is hard because there's just not enough capital flowing in. And something we talked a little bit about pre-interview is that, in your opinion, we've kind of hit that bottom and it's about to turn. Uh, can you maybe give us some thoughts on that?
Yeah, having watched the resource markets, mining, gold, silver, copper, nickel, uranium, the whole panoply of 92 elements on the periodic chart, as well as oil and gas and coal uh, for 50 years, which is a long time at this point. And I've watched the markets for these things in particular go up and down. It's my opinion, and I've seen some. I don't know. Over that time, I've seen about five runaway bull markets in resources where the average stock, and most of these stocks are crappy, make no mistake about it, and we can talk about why I say that, uh, has gone 10 to 1, where some go 100 to 1. And I've personally owned a couple, not much of it by the time it reached 1,000 to 1, but have gone 1,000 to 1 within 4 or 5 years. So it does happen. But uh, I went off on a tangent. What I'm trying to say here is that mining is a very tough industry. It's a crappy industry. It's not like in the days of Deadwood, where that show, which is probably the best thing that's been done in drama since Shakespeare, as far as I'm concerned. Well, it's about the discovery of the Homestake mine in Deadwood, South Dakota, about the time of Custer's last stand. And in those days, if you found a gold mine, it was like finding a gold mine. You were set for life. But now, just to find something that's a possible deposit costs you years and millions of dollars, and then to develop it takes years more and many millions of dollars. And then if you're going to build the mine after getting permitting, and it can cost tens or hundreds of millions or billions of dollars. And then you've got to deal with NGOs and native groups, and the government's going to treat you as a milk cow, and all the capital's up front. So mining and resources generally, oil and gas are much better this way, but they're still not good anymore because everybody hates these things because we're raping the earth, uh, even though you need it for everything that you have, and turns the lights on, it keeps you warm in the winter and so forth. And people don't care about that. But anyway, what I'm building up to is, with all these things, mining stocks are as cheap relatively and absolutely as they've ever been. And I think the worm is going to turn. And in a couple of years, it's taken a lot longer than I thought, these things are going to be howling. And people are going to be getting not just doubles and triples, they're going to be getting 10 baggers and more. Uh, within the next couple of years. I'll make that prediction, Steve. And I'm probably going to be wrong, but I think that's what's going to happen.
So on that point, um, uh, I had an interesting conversation with somebody who's made a lot of money in mining when I was in Beaver Creek, and he said that there's three things that when you're thinking about investing in mining, you really want to think about. Okay, the first one of those is you can't fight the tape. So if lithium stocks aren't moving like right now, stay away from lithium.
Yeah,
You got to wait until the capital's flowing in, or else you're wasting your time.
yeah,
The,
yeah,
the the second thing is try to find assets that are really really cheap, pennies on the dollar, that have already been drilled out. They've largely been de-risked and they've been forgotten about because that's the part of the cycle we're in. And then the third point is there's this concept called theta involved. Which is the time decay of investment, which is something you really got to think about when you're investing in junior mining, because the longer you have to wait, the more dilution you're going to have to experience, because it means that they're going to be drilling or they're going to be paying their G&A expenses, the exchange fees, whatever.
and they don't
So
have any income in the meantime, right?
yeah. So you got to get yeah yeah you got to get the macro right. You got to find a good cheap asset that somebody else has already spent the money to de-risk, and then you got to get the timing somewhat right. Do you agree
Yeah,
with that?
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Yep, I do indeed. These most of these mining stocks, and there are a couple thousand of them. I mean, they come and go every day. Most of them are burning matches, and a lot of them burn out and disappear, but then new ones start. There's a couple thousand in the world, and most of them don't make it. But when they do, when all those three things that you mentioned are right, yeah, you can hit a long ball home run that can set you up for many years.
You know where I'm seeing that setting up, that trade setting up, just in terms of I'm seeing some pretty good cheap assets out there that nobody cares about, and huge tailwinds is copper. We see all this talk about copper online on with obviously every time Robert Friedland speaks about copper, everybody
Oh yeah,
starts
right.
freaking out, and we haven't really, like, it's done well the last few years, right? Like I at the time of recording, I think we're up. Uh, 20% over the last year, and we're now trading around $4.30. That might be wrong, but it's doing
That's
okay.
close enough. I mean, that's right. Yeah,
But still, for a lot of these assets, is what we're kind of looking for is what was said to be too low grade last cycle is this cycle's high grade. And I think that's where I'm seeing just myself as a stock picker glancing at stuff. That's where I'm seeing a lot of value.
yeah. I'm a fan of copper. I'm a fan of all the elements at this point. Quite frankly, nickel. I mean, lithium is the price of lithium has collapsed, and of course, if you want an electric car, that's where most of the lithium goes. But your computer, your cell phone, they all use lithium too. Uh, it's way down. I don't know how long it will stay down, but that's an interesting thing to look at. Uh, I like uranium, frankly. I'm a big fan of uranium. And also, at this point, it's very cheap. I like coal. And you're not supposed to like coal because it's dirty, it's 19th century, blah, blah, blah. But, you're either a contrarian or you're a victim when we're talking about investing in resources. And you want to buy things that everybody hates, as long as there is a fundamental case for value. So I'd add uranium and coal, which I promise you nobody talks about. And none of the institutions will buy these things because they're political and sociological hot potatoes. Uh, and that'll change because reality always reasserts itself. So uh, the day is going to come when coal goes back to $200 a ton and more, and uranium goes to 150 or $200 a pound or more. Yeah, it's all going to happen. And gold, let's say gold is 2,500 now. I don't know where gold prices are going, but these governments are printing up money and credit, they have no alternative. It's either inflate or die. And there's going to be a panic into gold at some point to get out of paper currencies. So yeah, I'm long all of these things. And the stocks are really, really cheap. Even though when the elements go up, the stocks are still down there because institutions can't buy them for all kinds of reasons. They're too small for these giant institutions to buy. They don't want tiny little rounding errors. That's number one. Number two, they're so politically incorrect. Uh, all kinds of people whining and bitching about you can't own these things that are raping the earth and creating carbon dioxide and blah, blah, blah. So they can't buy them. And the retail public has forgotten they exist. Yep, time to buy.
Yeah, and what I find interesting about the price of gold is it's been a tremendous year for gold. We were hitting all-time highs last week, and we look at where all the buying in gold is happening. It's happening from central banks around the world. It's not happening from U.S. investors, where we're actually seeing negative flows on the ETF side. You turn on CNBC. If I put CNBC on behind me, I can almost promise you that they're not talking about gold. They'd be more likely to be talking about Bitcoin than gold. It's just for some reason they're not thinking about it. And what I find funny about that is that if gold goes up to say 3,500 to 4,000 over the next year, once it's had its run, then they'll start talking about it. But for some reason, they're ignoring it.
That's quite correct. And when they start talking about it, which they will at some point, then the public gets interested and piles in. And these stocks are so teeny weeny and lightly traded. They're not small caps. They're not mini caps or micro caps. Uh, they're not even nano caps. They're pico caps. So just a little bit of buying sends them way up. And I'm prepared to be patient and accumulate sound positions with good people. I mean, I've got, when I look to buy a mining stock, I look at 9Ps. It's a mnemonic that I developed so I can remember all the things so I don't forget anything. Uh, a mnemonic. But it's hard to remember more than three things. Most people can't even remember the 10 commandments. It's too many things to remember. So I can't even remember all the nine P's that I have. But number one, and by far the most important one, is people, because good people can turn anything into a success, and bad people can turn anything into a nightmare and a disaster. So I like to know the people that are running a company. That's number one by far. It's worth more than all the other things together. And the second thing I look at is the property. And for this, you should know something about geology. You should know something about mining engineering. And today, in today's world, another P, people, property, politics. There are some countries where the political situation is just too insane to try to do anything business-wise, but certainly mining. So I always look at that too. And there's lots of other things, but
Let's
we're not.
see. People, property, financing with a P,
That's right.
paper, promotion, politics, push, pitfalls, and price.
You got it. That's exactly correct. That's right.
Uh, Doug, you've been very generous with your time, and our audience always loves when you hop on here, and it's something that I always look forward to when we get to chat. For our audience that wants more of your commentary, where can they go to?
Well, three things. Number one is internationalman.com, which is a free daily blog, and it's really quite good. I mean, I do a lot for it, and so do some other really great people. So internationalman.com, everybody should subscribe to that. Secondly, on YouTube and other similar channels, we have Doug Casey's Take, where Matt Smith and I talk about all kinds of things uh, twice a week, typically. And third, I have three novels out that reform unjustly besmirched occupations. And they're pretty damn good novels, frankly. Speculator, Drug Lord, and Assassin. Well, that's an occupation you don't think about reforming. Anyway, the next one's going to be Terrorist, where our hero, Charles Knight, goes from being a bad boy to a really bad boy, although he's a good guy. So Go down to Amazon and buy those novels. You'll love it. You'll love them. So
Well, Doug,
that's my pitch.
thank you very much for hopping on here. It's always a great pleasure when we get to chat, and hopefully the next time we chat, we start to see some of this capital flow into some of the junior mining names, and it'll be a little bit more euphoric.
I'll keep my fingers crossed, although I won't hold my breath. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Doug. All right, everybody. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this interview, please smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Also, let me know what you think in the comment section. Thanks, everyone.